Welcome to another episode of Five Lemons Laughing. I'm Amanda. I'm here with Drusilla, Penny, Morgan, and Melissa. Hey, let me ask y'all this. Have you ever left a room and immediately started wondering what people are saying after you walked away?
Mm.
Yeah, I have.
Yes. And yes.
What if that fear didn't start with them? What if it began much earlier in the way that you heard adults talking about other people? Let that sink in for a moment. Today, we're exploring how the voices we grew up around can quietly become the own voices in your head.
Yeah. Sybil, the many voices in my head. Yeah, this is the way our parents and our caregivers spoke about other people. This often shapes what we learn and how we see ourselves in the world. So, like in my house, if criticism was a big thing, maybe gossip, judgment, or comparison, if it was part of the emotional atmosphere of the home, it's easy to internalize that. It was internalized as kids. And so that belief we take on to other people, like they must be speaking about us in the same way that it was in my household. And sometimes what we fear others are thinking is really just an echo of what we once heard in our home as kids. So as Mother's Day approaches, it feels like an important time to talk about this and have a compassionate conversation about it. So it's not to blame our moms or not to blame our families, but just to talk truth, to be lovingly noticing patterns that we inherited from other people, and see if those voices are still pertinent in our lives. And so much of that healing begins with recognizing what we learned, what we absorbed, and how we can lovingly release them. And I have two dogs I'm watching, so they're participating in the show as well.
Can't hear them.
Oh, you can't? I can hear them barking, so I thought you could. So when you hear that phrase, the way your parents talked about other people is the way you think other people are talking about you. What comes up for you?
So interesting. Such a good topic.
Yes.
I mean, I don't really remember thinking that my parents were super gossipy or negative or judgmental, but I remember one specific situation as a kid. I was probably 8, 9, 10, somewhere around in there. And one of my cousins was a good bit older. She was a teenager, and I thought she was beautiful and I thought she was cool. And I didn't see her very often because she lived in a different state. And she was my grandmother's sister's daughter. So she wasn't like a first cousin. She was a more removed cousin. But I remember they were either coming for a visit or they had just left from a visit. And I overheard my mom and her older sister talking shit about her and her mother and just about kind of how crazy they were. And it just wrecked me. I think it took me back to like a childhood wound where I was maybe talking about a cartoon that I liked. And one of my friends was like, "You like that show?" And like, it was clear that it was not cool to like that. So that's when I learned to shut down a part of myself. And so now this same experience was happening with my mom. Like all of a sudden, like, oh, this person that I don't like, it's not cool to like them and there's something wrong with them. And it just completely like created some kind of a fracture. I haven't really examined it closely or like dug into it, but I remember being so appalled when I heard them talking about her. And like, I didn't know what to do with that. So that's the one story that comes up for me around this topic.
So in the spirit of the topic, do you see that reflected in like what you think people are talking about you?
Yeah, not so much anymore, but I remember when, let's see, probably probably around 2018, 2019, when I first started like really rolling up my sleeves and taking like some of Jennifer Hadley's courses on like walking the talk and applying these spiritual principles to your life. I started to realize that my pain and suffering started with my thoughts. And so I started shutting down that, like, okay, I'm sitting here running a story in my mind about what people are saying about me, what they're thinking about me, and that's causing my suffering. And so I started working on healing that. So I don't do that as much anymore, but I can see up until about, how long ago was that? 5, 6, 7 years ago, I absolutely used to have a narration in my mind of worry and fear and defense and attack about like just making up stories about what people were saying about me or thinking about me. So yes, I guess yes is the long-winded answer to that question, but not as much anymore.
Yeah. I love the deep dive. I mean, that's the whole point of this conversation. So thank you for going into it.
Yeah, thank you for the question. What about y'all?
I remember not way young, but my dad and Sue would always, not always, but they lived a life of comparison. They needed to look a certain way and be a certain way. And if you didn't live like that, then you were less than. Especially just what's coming up into my mind is their level of cleanliness. Like I joke now that they have NASCAR clean. If you've ever been to like the NASCAR pits with, like you would think that grease, it's spotless. And, so like everything that they did was spotless. I don't know why I'm talking about that, except it's still a trigger, right? It's still a trigger for me. My car is so dirty right now. And I'm like, like it's just a dig. Like, but going back to like the deeper stuff, comparison. So like, I always assumed that people were looking at me and judging me based on what I had or didn't have in the way that I looked, like, the way I presented on the outside. Mm-hmm. So I definitely, that was a pattern that got instilled in me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Had you thought about that before this conversation?
Well, like you, I started working on it, right? So it's not anything new that's being revealed right now through spiritual work and just going in and seeing where all of the dialogue comes from. I have done a lot of healing around the comparison part. The cleanliness part, no. I'm rebelling. I'm still a teenage rebelling against that. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me ask you this. So you observed that was your father and his wife's pattern, mm-hmm. and you internalized that to think that other people were judging you and comparing you. Did you also externalize that and judge and compare others against a similar criteria?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I did, right? Because when I was younger, that was just what human nature, right? That's the way people were, right? I didn't have
that's what you were taught. Yeah.
That's what I was taught. I didn't know that there was anything different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I chuckle.
Yeah, go ahead, Penny.
I chuckle because when I was growing up too, my dad had a lot of judgments about people from the South. Sorry, Morgan.
Priscilla.
Okay. Oh, Amanda. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You're outnumbered, Penny.
Priscilla.
And Catholics. They're okay. All 4 of you are out of the game right now. I can't be your friends.
And you're going to leave the room, Penny. You're going to leave the room, Penny. We're going to talk about you. Okay.
Honestly, though, that is, he had a lot of biases towards them. And so it took me a while to get over those because that's what I was raised with. Like, you don't be friends with them, and they're out to get us or whatever. They're I guess it was like creating a better, they're better than us or something. I don't know. It seems like that's what I took on, is that they're better than us, but they're not. It's confusing now that I even talk about it. It's just confusing because I am so inclusive now in my life that I I am excited to meet people that talk differently than me
How
or
did
go
you
to
get
different
there?
religions. Huh?
How did you get to that space of being so inclusive with that type of history?
I think it was because I was so rebellious against my dad. I
Yeah.
wanted to do whatever the
Like,
opposite of whatever it was that he thought, because I didn't think that he was right. And of course, he was right about a lot of stuff, but he wasn't right about that people from the South that have a different way of talking and Catholics are bad. They're not. So maybe some are, but not all.
yeah. And you
But
bring
yeah.
up a good point, because this is exactly, I mean, this is an interesting topic, because I've never thought about it in the terms and in the sense of like, the reason I'm so self-conscious that people are judging me, gossiping about me, talking about me, is because, we heard our parents do that. But it's really the same thing as like how bigotry and racism and hatred and all of that gets passed down. So it's not a new topic. We're just looking at a different, all the different implications that it has, not just when it comes to things like bigotry. So yeah, it impacts us in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I'm just grateful that that was not handed down to me.
Mhm.
It would have been the people from the North, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sitting
So,
here. I'm I'm sitting here reflecting on something else that my dad, and not just to blame my dad, right? It's whole society. Um, but this is what we're talking about. When I was really young, my dad said, "You've got thin ankles, you'll be okay. You've got small ankles," right? And weight was a really big thing. Um,
Vanity.
yeah, he like women, like men could be fat, thin, as long as they had money, it didn't matter, right? That was it.
Mm.
But women had to look a certain way. And I think that so much body stuff was around me having to look a certain way. And I running in the loop of my mind, maybe not always like hearing it, but it was back there, was if I don't look this way, these people are going to be talking about me. Yeah,
I think that's a big one for a lot of
that's a
people.
big one.
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that came to my mind when Morgan first started explaining how this made her feel was, wow, she was so specific about this one time. And it feels like to me, my whole childhood was based on gossip and talking about people and judging people. So I'm like, wow, that's pretty amazing, Morgan. You probably have a lot less work to do than I do around this topic, because I think back to my childhood, and I I just remember my mother being on the phone with her cousins, just like my cousins, but on the phone with her cousins, gossiping about each other all the time. I mean, that was just it. And I do remember thinking, oh my God, you were just talking about her and now you're on the phone with her like you're all buddies, right? And I knew that there was something not right about that. And I have two of my sisters, my two older sisters, one's 5 years older than me and one's 6 years older. I saw them do the exact same thing. And I vowed that that would never be me, because I just saw that I felt it was so wrong. Maybe if they had been doing it, but then they wouldn't turn around and talking to the same person that they were talking about 5 minutes ago, then I probably wouldn't have known that it was so wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that probably allowed me to swing the other way to the other extreme. So when I was in school, I thought everybody was my friend and I vowed never to talk about anybody, right? Which is, I don't know how realistic that is either. But yeah, my whole childhood was all about all of it, all the
Well,
time,
when you
constantly.
vowed to do it differently and to just not talk about other people and to be friends with everyone, did you carry any fear that they were going to be talking about you?
I did. I did. And I will say this until we, reviewed the topic before coming on today. I never even thought about it, even in the spiritual work that I've done to, release myself of judgment thoughts. I didn't look at it from the third perspective. I always looked at it from the perspective of, my judgment thoughts against other people and not thinking about that it's impacting me also because I think other people are thinking or talking about me in
Mhm.
that way. So that is the third element of it that I never really thought about.
Yeah. And do you feel that way now around other people?
I feel like with the work I've done on releasing my own judgment thoughts also does impact that part.
Mhm. Yeah.
The awareness is there all the way around the 360 of it. So I think that in and of itself, it does help with that. But I can see now looking back throughout my life that yes, I cared so much about my appearance. And I blame it on the fact that my mom compared and always wanted her children to look the best to represent her in a certain way. Right.
Mhm.
Um, and so I attributed it more to that than I did of, my thoughts are aligning with the way I saw her talk about people. So I know people are talking about me in that same way.
Mhm.
But I think it's all the same.
Well, one thing that I really love about what you said, and I think this could be helpful for people to hear, is that you didn't have to work it from both sides of the coin. Like you just focused on healing your judgments and your gossiping and all of that around other people. And it naturally healed that sense of worrying that people were gossiping and talking about you because everything is connected, everything is a hologram. And because you attract what you are, and you no longer were being that. So you were no longer attracting that. So we don't have to, I mean, sometimes being on this spiritual journey can feel overwhelming and like there's so much to uncover and discover and heal. And it really isn't. Like you can just really get into one little area of your life and heal it completely, and you're done. The work is done.
Mhm.
So I feel like we can kind of just breathe a big sigh of relief that we don't have to examine every single piece of our life and our thoughts and our mind to have a healing and to, wake up.
I'll even say that, I feel like the society in general, and I think you mentioned this, Penny, and also Amanda, about it wasn't just our parents, it was kind of societal, right? I mean, they watch soap operas every day. What else was there to do except for talk about people, right? Like, think, most people are aware that, comparison and gossip it's not, um, kind of gonna be a good thing for you personally to sit around and do that all day. So I think society in general is more aware, but I feel like, for me now, it's shifted to it even bothers me so much to hear people be so concerned about appearances. Like, it's certain people that I talk to, it's like everything they say, it's about somebody's appearance, And I think that's just another level of it's triggering me to make sure I stay in the awareness of it. Um, but I think that that's just something that I continue to figure out a way to navigate around people without judging them. Right.
I love that, Drusilla, because what it is bringing up for me is like it's opening a little bit of compassion for the
Mm-hmm.
gossiper, right? Like the
Yes.
mm-hmm, because what was their history like? Like what brought them to the place where, that um, to me, gossiping is a lot of better than, less than, right? That's the whole dominion over concept. So it does bring a little bit more compassion, right? It's hard not to judge the judger, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we know it all stems from some kind of insecurity. They're
Yeah.
trying to bolster
Mhm.
themselves in some way in doing that. So, yeah, you're right. May not be easy to have compassion for them in the moment, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Melissa?
I don't really think my family, my mom is a big gossiper. I mean, I don't recall that. I know she was very critical of people in general, me, my sister, but I don't. I really didn't like grow up thinking I walked out of a room and people were talking about me. I did think, however, whatever my insecurities were, that's what they didn't like about me. Like it's like I transferred what I saw was my shortcoming to them, and they thought it was also my shortcoming. It was just the story in my head. And so I don't feel like I necessarily heard other people based on what my mom uh, based on her behavior, but she created a very critical environment where we were critical. And so I think we thought other people were critical of the same things we were critical about.
Yeah.
And
Like
that's maybe what you're
constantly
saying.
judging your work and measuring your work against some kind of
Yeah. That or our behavior, or are we ladylike enough or um, smart enough, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it wasn't just a general like, oh, Melissa, kind of saying stuff under their breath when I walked out. I'd never worried about that. It was like, oh, maybe she doesn't think I'm very smart. It went right to what I thought was my insecurity.
Mm-hmm. And did you also have those kind of conversations about other people in your head?
Yeah, because that was the
Up
filter
until
for
when,
you.
or is it still happening?
Like 2 minutes ago? No. No, I can catch myself, and also I can't catch myself sometimes. Sometimes I just do it and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? But yeah, it was just a pattern thing for me. Was there something else? No. Okay.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say, Melissa, is that your mom's critical voice kind of uh, took a turn inward toward you, and so
Yeah.
that's why you're so critical on yourself,
Yes.
and you think that others. That's an interesting twist, right?
I don't think other people are critical about me, but I am critical about the people in my life. Sometimes, like, you should be this way, or
Mm-hmm.
I really feel it's like the lens I look through.
Mhm. Yeah. And of
And
course, so much of that is shaped by our childhood and our
right.
parents.
I was taught to look through.
Right.
And like Amanda said, I didn't know any different. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you all
Yeah.
have a lot of sleepovers at friends' places?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We did.
So then you saw it differently. What did you know? Yeah. I remember going to our superintendent's home because his daughter was my classmate, and they put cornflakes on their their hot dish. And that was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that.
That's Southern, Penny.
I know, we were in North Dakota.
You didn't allow that in your house.
It wasn't in our house.
No.
But was it tasty?
It was yummy. But it was just interesting to go to other people's houses and see how they, they lived and how they talked to each other and stuff. Yeah, that just bubbled up in my head for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah. As a child, just especially to realize like, gosh, there's a whole other way that people live that is completely different. Like you just assume that your parents are God and they know like they're teaching you the ways of the world, and then you go to a friend's house and you're like, oh, they're not the ways of the world. They're just the ways of our little corner of the world. And it's like mind blowing.
Yep. Yeah.
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 When you start
amazing.
to realize how small you are in relation to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is when it becomes really like truth to you and your family. Like this is how it is. And then that's how you live.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've all talked a little bit about how this used to really kind of run in the background more than it does because of the work that we've done. But like, how do you start unwinding that constant narration, constant fear or worry of what other people are thinking about you, what other people are saying about you when you leave the room? Even like for me, it was a lot of like, I wonder how they took what I just said, if they understood what I said correctly or the way that I intended for it. And just, all of the stories that our mind just plays on a loop in our head for hours or days or even weeks after a conversation has ended. Like, how do you begin to unwind that?
So that's a lot about self-esteem, right? Like, yeah. So when did our self-esteem get, molded to be questioning questioning if people are talking about us or if we did it right or whatever? I think that's kind of what's coming up for me. It's because I had esteem issues also after being raised with a very judgmental and biased father. And so, yeah. Anybody else feel that?
Absolutely. I think, being able to show up authentically, whatever that looks like, goes a long ways to doing that. I think for me, the first step, and Jennifer Hadley is really good at teaching this is forgiveness, like going into whatever it is. Like, I did a lot of work on forgiving that family dynamic, right? Forgiving all that was involved with all that was involved, like, my dad saying that about my ankles, right? Like it didn't sit right then. It still doesn't sit right. But to go in and really forgive that and really just to accept that it happened, right? There's no going back and changing what happened, but accept it. Forgive myself for any role that I played in it or anything that I took from it that carried forward. So there's a whole lot to forgiveness. And through that is how I started working on showing up authentically and not being the apologizer or the the one that always changed to fit in, right? Like through forgiveness, I got to find out who I was authentically.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer Hadley.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this while we're thinking about it. Jennifer Hadley does free forgiveness workshops all the time. There's a forgiveness letter template on her website, and it walks through the process that I just that, I briefly explained. There's, a lot more to it, but the whole forgiveness is a great place to start any type of healing. And it's really about self-forgiveness.
Yeah. And that's, I think you're right that forgiveness is a huge piece of it. And it was not the starting point for me. That was kind of the deeper level. That was kind of when I'm ready to really roll up the sleeves and dig into it. The starting point for me was just to recognize when it was happening, when I was having these fears and worries, and they were running wild, running rampant, and to just be willing to recognize it, interrupt it, and question the thought. Like, is it true that these people are talking about me? Can I absolutely know that it's true that these people are thinking these things that I've conjured up in my mind about me? And just like that little simple willingness to interrupt the pattern, just like diffused the whole ego story in my head, interrupted the whole story in my head, and like was like releasing a pressure valve. And then it created space for me to allow clarity in. And like, so that was the starting point for me. And yes, definitely some forgiveness work eventually had to be done to eliminate, like to get to the root cause. But just that simple first step was what was most effective for me in the beginning. And then eventually it led to other things like, being being afraid to speak up or be authentic, like starting to address that, like, starting to like approach people and say, I was having the thought that maybe you were thinking X, Y, and Z. And I just, rather than just thinking it, I thought I would just come to you and talk to you about it. Or I'd like to clarify in case you were thinking X, Y, and Z that this is what I meant, just being willing to have the vulnerable conversations with people instead of just having them in my mind. And that is liberating to other people as well, because then they see they're not the only ones in the loony bin in their mind, and that, you're willing to just come out with it and have a real conversation about it. And then like years later, now I find myself working for Power of Love Ministry for Jennifer Hadley part-time. And I'm learning so much about how to, like, I also don't want to say anything about anyone that I wouldn't be willing to say to their face. And so there have been plenty of opportunities for me to, and Jennifer Hadley is an 8 on the Enneagram. She appreciates direct, no sugarcoating, just tell it to me straight. And so I'm having to really find my voice and call her out on some things, because she's a brilliant spiritual teacher. She's the founder of a beautiful, gorgeous ministry. And she's not really that great at running the ministry from like an administrative standpoint, leader, like team player type of a standpoint. She's great at being a visionary, great at like leading spiritual classes. And I'm having to be direct with her and tell her like, well, I think that this is where we went wrong. I think that this could have been done better. I think that we need to, and it's just, it's been a whole extension of this healing journey, learning to not be afraid to speak directly with people, even if formerly it would have felt like conflict or like there would be some fear involved in it. I don't know. So it's just the
Healthy
healing
conflict.
just keeps happening in health. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
There's always more layers of it to unravel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you were sharing, Morgan. One of the books that really helped me on my journey was The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, because what's the very first agreement is, oh my God, I lost it. What's the very first agreement? Always speak your truth, I think. No, God, I can't remember. But anyway, it's all about,
is it that one?
Pardon me?
Be impeccable with your words.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Drusilla. Yeah, be impeccable with your word, which means that you don't gossip about others or yourself. That was a hard one for me to like capture, like, because I was so good at gossiping about myself. I didn't gossip about others, maybe mostly, but I did a lot of gossiping about myself, and being very critical about myself, like you were talking about, Melissa. And Yeah. So that's another resource that people might want to take a look at is the
Yeah,
4 agreements. Yeah.
I agree. It's a
Be
great
impeccable
place
with
to
your
start.
word. Don't take anything personally. Always do your best. And I can't remember the fourth, but
I'm so glad you brought that book up though, because
yeah.
you're right. It is a really great entry point, and
Mhm.
I think I probably read that book around the time, and it started to kind of wedge this open for me as well. So
Mhm.
that's a great book.
Don't make assumptions. That's the fourth agreement. So, like you were saying
Yeah.
that too, Morgan, you're not assuming that you understand what anybody means. You
Right.
need to ask some clarifying questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew, I got him. I'm so happy about that.
Good job, Penny.
Yay. Yeah, I think for me, and I've already probably explained it, so I won't go into details about it, but I clearly started with understanding that the judgment thoughts running rampant, not necessarily digging into where they came from. I knew it was very clear that, it was the environment I was raised in. So I didn't have to do much digging around, but it was, understanding that those thoughts came from stories I was telling myself and just being aware that they were there. And that was the starting point for me.
So, is there any steps between awareness and forgiveness that maybe has worked for others? Because it sounds like awareness is the first step. Forgiveness is one of the next steps.
A big one for me, again, I learned it through the ministry, was that I didn't have to do it, um, that I could turn it to God to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So thoughts would come up and I would just turn this over. I would pray about it. Like, so this thought is coming up, and it was usually about myself that was coming up. Like, yeah, I'm ready for this to be healed. I'm ready for this to be healed. I don't have to actually go into it, because I had some pretty deep healing of, pretty scary stuff. So my mind couldn't wrap around, because I thought healing was I have to go in and I have to relive it and I have to look at it and I have to really get into whatever trauma it was. And that was a big starting point for me, was I'm willing to heal this. If I have to look at it, like, me talking to God, if I have to look at it, I will. But if I can heal it without it and it would just go away, that's good too. Like, that's my preferred way. Over and over again, whenever thoughts, judgments, whatever would come up, that feeling, scary feeling about shit's really getting ready to hit the fan. That's, I would just turn it over and over and over,
Mhm.
which allowed me to look at it and allowed me to be more authentic in the forgiveness process.
Yeah. I think that's helpful, because I think sometimes we go into these and we try to examine, like, what is in this for me to learn, what is in this for me to discover, and there's still so much emotional charge that no immediate clarity is coming to the surface, and then the ego can weaponize that against us, like, this isn't working for me, I'm a spiritual student failure, I'm failing at this stuff. So, like, coming from that space of, like, I'm willing to understand why this is showing up, what my part in it is, what this is here to teach me, what I can learn from this, but I don't know how to get there. So just I'm trusting that it will be revealed if there's anything for me to know. Otherwise, I'm handing this over. I think that's a great, like, kind of shortcut tool for people to use when they feel like they're kind of hung up on something and can't quite reach the clarity that they're desiring.
Mm. One thing that just came to mind that I don't think we touched on, and it came up while you were talking, Morgan, is the understanding that we're doing it. We recognize that it came from somewhere. There is a chance that we were getting something out of it as
Mhm.
well. It's not just something out there happening. We were also, you know, getting something out of it. Maybe the
Mm.
victim of people
Yes.
talking about you, Or on the flip side, feeling empowered because you are better or you think you're smarter or, that part of it. I remember having to come to terms with that as a part of the process as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that is so valid and so helpful. And I think it could be expounded on a little bit more, because what do you mean? What's the victim benefit? I'm right there with you. That was the benefit I get out of it. But can you say more about how that's a benefit or what that means?
Um, Let me see. How would I explain that to someone? If you, for example, a person who has issues with saying that people are body shaming them, right? That they feel a certain way. They don't like to go out in public because they fear people are talking about them. Therefore, they, you know, don't go out and exercise and do what they need to do. Then they really are becoming a victim of what they think people are saying about them and what they think people are thinking about them. So they're the ones that's really creating the victimhood based on their own thoughts.
Yeah.
That may be more complex than should have
No, I
been,
think
but
that's a beautiful, a beautiful example. And it's totally different from the way that my mind went with it. And I think what you said is very helpful. But the benefit that I see that I had to give up is like the ego personality self that is Morgan loved to identify with the victim. And so that was the benefit I was getting out of all of these. Like it was reaffirming that I'm the victim. I'm not the attacker. I'm not the perpetrator. I'm not the bad guy. I'm not the mean one. I'm the sweet little innocent victim. So it was just shoring up that identification. And so we have to be willing to let go of our ego stories and identifications if we want to allow this stuff to heal. So yeah, you have to recognize what is the benefit in these triggers and these upsets for me, and am I willing to let those go? And the person that you just described, like the benefit is I don't want to go to the gym, and now I have a reason not to, because people are going to be judging me if I get out of the house, and you know what I mean. So there, we often don't want to look at that piece of it, like where am I getting something good out of this? Because on the surface, it's usually not obvious or clear. Any final thoughts before we hear Penny's post-its?
Morgan, you brought this to us, and I'm really glad that you brought this topic because it's a different way of looking at it and a different way of just allowing compassion for ourselves and for others. So thank you for bringing this topic to us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got to add that to my note. Okay, now I'm ready.
Yay, Penny's post-its.
So the very first one I really loved, you don't have to work it from both sides of the coin, is what Morgan said, but just work on your own healing. I mean, that's really what this is all about, I think. And this one's a fun one because I took what Drusilla said and says, we know comparison and gossip isn't good for anyone. Well, do we really know that? Sometimes we do. Mostly we know that, right? Not all the time, though. Mostly. And then, the steps were awareness, forgiveness, vulnerability, turn it over to God, and compassion. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then just, always taking a look at what you might be getting out of it if you keep perpetuating it. I think that's another thing too, and as we wrap up, just pay attention to when you hear yourself, or when you're not here, but you'll hear the voices. Yeah. Start paying attention to the voices that you're hearing and recognize if they are part of you or if they come from the past of you. I mean, they're echoes of what we heard growing up, or they're, experiences that we had that we've absorbed from the atmosphere around us. It might not even be from our family. It could be from our friends. It could be from anywhere, but they're not our voices. And so we're not here to blame anybody. We're not here to shame anybody. It's just about noticing. Just notice, like awareness, like Morgan was talking about. It's just, hey, that voice doesn't really, or that thought doesn't really, that's not who I am. And so that's when you can start doing the healing process and forgive yourself and move on. And so just honor yourself, though. We're all on this journey and it's a process. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, we will heal, but we need to work for it. I mean, that's what it's consistent work that's working for all of us in this podcast, I know. So just take a moment, ask yourself, whose voice am I listening to? And is it time to let my own voice lead the way? That's the key. And so we're sending you such a big hug and big love as you go out there and practice and remember that your transformation is always our greatest joy. So have a blessed and beautiful rest of your day. And we will see you next week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.